The following is distributed by the Berean Call.
Chapter 11. Hitler, the Almost Antichrist. We've already noted that the Bible says two incredible things about the Antichrist: that he will unite the entire world, first politically, and second, religiously. In fact, it is prophesied specifically that, quote, all who dwell on the earth will worship him, unquote. Worship implies religion. The leading Nazis were all convinced that National Socialism was a new religion that was destined to rule the world and establish a new age. Hitler said, quote, whoever sees in National Socialism nothing but a political movement doesn't know much about it. We shall wash off the Christian veneer and bring out a religion peculiar to our race, unquote. Dr. Ley, head of the Nazi Labor Front, declared, quote, our faith is National Socialism, and this religious faith does not tolerate any other faith alongside itself, unquote. It was clear that Rudolf Hess's religion replaced God with Hitler, exactly what the whole earth will do with the Antichrist. French academician Louis Bertrand, a convert to Nazism, exulted in his newfound Messiah. Quote, what sovereign, what national hero has ever been acclaimed, adulated, adored, and worshipped as has Hitler, this little man in the brown shirt, followed by his cortege? This is something altogether different from mere popularity. This is religion. In the eyes of his admirers, Hitler is a prophet, the partaker of the divine, unquote. Had it not been for a few miscalculations, Hitler could conceivably have conquered the world. Although he failed in that grandiose ambition, he was worshipped, if ever man was. That is what gives Hitler special significance for our analysis, the fanatical, blind submission that most of Germany gave to him, embracing with wild enthusiasm his most insane whims. Germany's fawning, mindless adulation of Hitler would seem to offer an instructive example of the very kind of worship which the Bible predicts the whole world will give to the Antichrist. As William Shirer, author of The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and an astute observer who saw it all happen, wrote in his diary at the time, quote, today, as far as the vast majority of his fellow countrymen are concerned, he, that is Hitler, has reached a pinnacle never before achieved by a German ruler. He has become, even before his death, a myth, a legend, almost a god, with that quality of divinity which the Japanese people ascribe to their emperor, unquote. What source this dark power? There is no normal explanation for the staggering mystery that was Hitler, an inept and bumbling ex-corporal with obsessive delusions, rising out of obscurity to make the entire world tremble. Bewildered historians have asked the question, how could a man so ignorant, so enslaved by stupid dogmas, have achieved such practical success? Yet this comic figure, with the bobbing mustache and frantic gestures, outmaneuvered the world's leaders time and again with his insane boldness, conquered Europe with ridiculous swiftness, and held the destiny of nations in his mad grip. There is neither political, psychological, nor other ordinary answer to the enigma that was Hitler. What was the mysterious source of the irresistible seduction with which this deluded Messiah dragged millions into destruction in his wake? When it came to swaying a huge audience, a nation, the world, no human was Hitler's equal. During his speeches, he was like a medium in a trance. Afterwards, like a medium who has been drained by the spirits, Hitler would collapse, deathly pale and exhausted, and it would take several draughts of beer to revive him. Impounded by Allied intelligence after the fall of Berlin, the personal diary of Joseph Goebbels, who became Nazi Minister of Propaganda, reveals the hypnotic influence that Hitler exerted upon him when they first met. Quote, he is the creative instrument of fate and deity. I stand by him deeply shaken, recognize him as my leader. He is so deep and mystical, like a prophet of old. With such a man one can conquer the world. My doubts vanish. Germany will live. Heil Hitler, unquote. It may be true that Goebbels was an unstable neurotic, ripe for hero worship. But why was this unlikely little man in the brown shirt the one who completely mesmerized him? And what of the multitude of other men with strong wills and brilliant minds who were also swept relentlessly into this maelstrom of evil just as suddenly and completely? After meeting Hitler in 1941, the historian Benoist Meichen declared in awe, quote, "His eyes, so strange that at first they were all I saw. He had a way of looking at you which drew you to him. You felt a sort of dizziness." Unquote. At the Nuremberg trials, Marshal von Blomberg testified, quote, "It was almost impossible to contradict Hitler. He swept you along with him. His personal magnetism was tremendous. He had an enormous power of suggestion." Unquote. Magnetism, an enormous power of suggestion. We have heard that before. Surely Mesmer and Coué would have stood in jealous awe of this master manipulator of men and nations who took the hypnotic powers they had uncovered and used them to mold millions to his evil will. Pointing out that Mein Kampf, quote, "is a succession of rambling, banal, and intensely wearisome monologues by a thoroughly third-rate mind, Gerald Suster says, whatever powers Hitler did acquire were wholly independent of the intellect. Then Suster adds, one does not acquire such power by accident. Someone who believes that will believe anything. One acquires it by patient training." Unquote. The obvious question follows immediately, training by whom, and for what? Though most historians have shied away from mentioning it, there is overwhelming evidence that Hitler was adept at various forms of Eastern mysticism. Suster points out that he was involved in a wide range of esoteric practices, quote, "The wisdom of Gurdjieff, derived from Sufi mystics and Tibetan lamas, and the Zen mysticism of the Japanese, these teachings stressed the existence of certain centers of power, or chakras, in the human body, to be activated by dint of yogic or magical exercises, which bring to the practitioner some rather unusual powers, most notably that of being able to impose one's will upon others. The most important of these centers is between and behind the eyebrows, known by some as the Ajna chakra, by some as the third eye." Unquote. It all sounds alarmingly familiar, so very much like the beliefs and practices that have become extremely popular in the human potential movement of the 1980s. In his day, only Hitler and a relatively few others took these things seriously, and those who did were involved in the numerous secret occult societies that were experiencing a revival in the 1920s and 1930s across Europe. This was not for the general public, at least not to be acknowledged openly. Today, however, the very beliefs and practices that the evidence so clearly indicates form the power base for Nazism are the everyday fare of tens of millions of people. Indeed, the entire New Age movement is based upon the yoga, chakras, astrology, reincarnation, vegetarianism, Zen, and other forms of a syncretistic mysticism that was practiced by the Nazi elite. We are much more susceptible to the deadly deception of the Antichrist than was the world of Hitler's day. The Occult Connection. One of Hitler's earliest and most important mentors was the master occultist Dietrich Eckart, who seems to have recognized in Hitler from the moment he saw him the Messiah he had so long awaited. An indication of Hitler's great respect for Eckart and the central role that his spiritual leadership played in the rise of Nazism is found in the last sentence of Mein Kampf. There Hitler lauds black magician Eckart as one, quote, "who devoted his life to the awakening of our people," unquote. Awakening them to what? That becomes very clear. The high priest of the Thule Society, a secret occult group which Hitler joined when he was still unknown, Dietrich Eckart has often been called the spiritual founder of National Socialism. The Thule Gesellschaft took its name from the mythical Nordic Garden of Eden in the far north that had supposedly been peopled by ETs or gods. Goethe's Faust and Wagner's Parsifal expressed the German preoccupation with the legend of Thule, also known as Hyperborea. Nietzsche, whose writings heavily influenced Hitler, began his key work, Antichrist, with the sentence, quote, "Let us see ourselves for what we are. We are Hyperboreans," unquote. Among the fabled descendants of the Hyperboreans were initiates who had allegedly received from the gods themselves the occult gnosis, or primordial knowledge, fruit of the tree of knowledge, giving them power to unlock the secrets of the universe. To recapture this mystical force for himself and Germany became Hitler's passion and that of his close associates. Hitler would later send expeditions to Tibet in search of the masters of wisdom from Atlantis and Hyperborea, who, according to occult traditions, were living high in the Himalayas. In his May 1982 news conference in Los Angeles, Benjamin Creme declared that the Christ mentioned in those full-page ads of a month earlier came to London in 1977 from the Himalayas, where he had been living, quote, at the 17,500-foot level for the past 2,000 years, unquote. Apparently Creme's Christ has the same backing as did Hitler. The occult was Hitler's absorbing interest from his youth. Among his favorite books were those involving Germanic mythology and Eastern mysticism, especially Tibetan occultism. He greatly admired the mystical poet Gerhard Hauptmann, whose esoteric works carried the message of a revived paganism, often portrayed in Buddhist terms, opposing and conquering traditional Christianity. Another of Hitler's favorite authors was the poet Stefan George, to whom Hitler offered the presidency of the German Academy in 1933. Like Erwin Guido Kolbenheier, another producer of what Hitler called great National Socialist literature, George conveyed Hinduism's view that the physical world is Maya, an illusion. His writings were a condemnation of traditional Christianity and a promotion of Eastern mysticism, including the merging of individual with the universe itself. This same unity consciousness would be experienced under LSD and TM a generation later by millions of the followers of Timothy Leary, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and other gurus in the consciousness revolution. Memories are short, however, and few people would see the significant connection between Nazism and the New Age movement, Aquarian conspiracy. There is no denying it, however, for those whose eyes see it. Under the leadership of the Thule Gesellschaft, a merger of most of the rising mystical occult groups in Europe was to take place. On this ecumenical mystic base, a pagan Germany, purged of all non-Aryan blood, would be rebuilt by the Nazis. At the head of the new order would be Hitler, the supreme initiate of an occult tradition with roots going back through Tibet and India to Thule. The Aryan Messiah would establish the millennium promised by prophets. Hitler loved to call the Third Reich the 1,000-Year Reich. The Aryan ambitions of the occultists in the Thule Society became much of the platform of the Nazi Party under the leadership of its New Age Messiah. That this occult connection was a very real one can easily be seen by noting some of the Nazi leaders who were active in Thule Gesellschaft. Max Amann, later editor-in-chief of Nazi publications, Rudolf Hess and Alfred Rosenberg, among Hitler's closest advisors, Anton Drexler, founder of the German Workers' Party, which became the Nazi Party, Dietrich Eckart, spiritual high priest of the Nazi Party, Gottfried Feder, deputy of the Reichstag in 1924 and co-founder of the Nazi Party, Karl Fehler, Obergruppenführer, SS, and Reichsleader of the Nazi Party, Hans Frank, legal advisor to the Nazi Party and later Governor General of occupied Poland, Baron Rudolf von Sabotendorf, chief astrologer to Hitler, Hitler himself. The Hierarchical Masters of Shamballah. The Vril Society, still in existence in India today with swastika-engraved temples and millions of members, had numerous branches in pre-Nazi Germany. Hitler belonged to the Vril Society, as did Alfred Rosenberg, Dr. Theodor Morell, who later became the Führer's personal physician, Hermann Goering, and Heinrich Himmler, who became the second most powerful man in Germany as head of the infamous SS, whose inner core took irreversible vows in service of Lucifer. The Vril's leader in Berlin was Karl Haushofer, brilliant ex-general and university professor who kept his occult activities so secret that he fooled many a historian. Taught by Gurdjieff in Tibet and by the Green Dragon Society in Japan, Haushofer took over the spiritual education of Hitler after the death of their mutual friend Dietrich Eckart and initiated him into Theosophist Blavatsky's secret doctrine. Today, these beliefs lie behind much of the New Age movement. They were enlarged upon by Alice Bailey and are at the heart of Benjamin Krem's pronouncements concerning Lord Maitreya, who he claims is the Christ now present upon earth. Ravenscroft's comments are instructive. Quote, by divulging the secret doctrine, Haushofer expanded Hitler's time consciousness and awakened Hitler to the real motives of the Luciferic principality which possessed him, so that he could become the conscious vehicle of its evil intent in the 20th century. And finally, Haushofer himself took on the role of Mephistopheles when he initiated Adolf Hitler into the occult significance of the blood and the part which occult blood rites would play in creating a magical mutation in the Aryan race, which would bring about a new stage in human evolution, the birth of the Superman." Unquote. The compelling obsession of the Vril Society was the belief that Germans were related to a master race of Aryans, the early Hindus, who were descended from the gods that once inhabited Hyperborea and Atlantis. Some of these supermen were alleged to be still alive in Tibet, high in the Himalayas, or in the Gobi Desert, in a mysterious place called Shamballah. In Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, and in the Lucis Trust, originally Lucifer Publishing, books of Alice Bailey and other occultists, Shamballah was also connected with a force that held the key to rejuvenation of the human race. According to Blavatsky, Bailey, and others, humanity is guided by a hierarchy of masters of wisdom toward its rightful destiny of godhood. Similar teachings come from Elizabeth Clare Prophet, Guru Ma of the Church Universal and Triumphant, who stumps for the New Age revolution in higher consciousness, and a host of other occultists today, including Benjamin Krem. His Lord Maitreya, the Christ, is alleged to be the leader of this hierarchy of masters from Shamballah. There is little question that Hitler not only believed in them devoutly, but thought he was in contact with these masters of wisdom, who Krem says are at last ushering in the New Age. In altered states of consciousness achieved through yoga and other occult practices of the Vrilists that Hitler engaged in, one could supposedly communicate with these masters of wisdom, thereby gaining initiation into the secret Tibetan gnosis. By this means, psychic powers could be developed and the restoration of the master race begun. The Nazi initiates endeavored to maintain telepathic communication with the unknown master, who was the alleged leader of the Tibetan supermen. Systematic visualization was the key to contact with the masters. We've already seen that this same occult practice has been revived and popularized in today's New Age under a variety of names and techniques, as guided imagery used by psychiatrists and psychologists, in Christian healing of the memories, in Silva mind control, in success and management seminars, and as part of confluent education and other New Age learning methods in public schools and self-help groups. The list is endless, and so is the danger. Hitler's involvement in these occult practices produced startling results. He seems to have gone beyond telepathic contact to visions of, or even actual visitations from, the unknown master himself. Hermann Rauschning, governor of Danzig, who knew Hitler intimately, tells of Hitler trembling in a kind of ecstasy while making the following announcement, quote, "The new man is living amongst us now. He is here. Isn't that enough for you? I will tell you a secret. I have seen the new man. He is intrepid and cruel. I was afraid of him." Unquote. The Terrorized Messiah. Some of those closest to Hitler came to believe that he was manipulated by invisible forces, those unknown superiors, as the Nazi elite sometimes called them. In a 1934 speech, Rudolf Hess declared, quote, "We believe that the Führer is obeying a higher call to fashion German history." Unquote. The higher call was not from God by any means, but from these unknown masters that Hitler both served and feared. Although Hitler believed they were highly evolved humanoid creatures possessed of supernatural powers, much as Uri Geller believes his ETs are today, their effect upon Hitler and other Nazi leaders was too much like demon possession for coincidence. Historian Alan Bullock has written, quote, "Until the last days of his life, he retained an uncanny gift of personal magnetism which defies analysis. His power to bewitch an audience has been likened to the occult arts of the African medicine man or the Asiatic shaman." Unquote. Those who can bewitch others must first of all have been bewitched themselves. A careful study of the Nazi Messiah offers strong evidence that something more than the human mind must be involved in autosuggestion and hypnosis. Could there indeed be, as Uri Geller and so many believe, other minds not of this world exerting their influence from behind the scenes? No other explanation of Hitler's powers seems feasible. Like Uri Geller, Hitler confided in those closest to him that he was under orders from higher beings, whom he often implied would not allow him to tell all that he knew of his unique mission. Quote, "I will tell you a secret," Hitler told Rauschning. "I am founding an order. The man-god, that splendid being, will be an object of worship, but there are other stages about which I am not permitted to speak." Unquote. Reflecting upon his experiences with Hitler, Rauschning declared with awe, quote, "One cannot help thinking of him as a medium. The medium is possessed, beyond any doubt. Hitler was possessed by forces outside himself, of which the individual named Hitler was only the temporary vehicle." Unquote. Even more than his public tirades, Hitler's conduct in private with those who knew him best bore all the marks of classic demon possession. The mysterious masters of Shamballah not only gave Hitler his orders and his hypnotic powers, they also terrorized him. From inside sources, Rauschning learned that Hitler often, quote, "woke up nights shouting convulsively." The account continues. "He yells for help, seized with a power which makes him tremble so violently that his bed shakes. Hitler was standing there in his bedroom, stumbling about, looking around him, distraught. He was muttering, 'It's he! It's he! He's here!' His lips had turned blue. He was dripping with sweat. He was given a massage and something to drink. Then, all of a sudden, he screamed, 'There! Over there! In the corner!'" Unquote. Possessed by the unknown master? Was this invisible being that periodically terrorized Hitler the one he sometimes called the unknown master? Henry Bergson's brother-in-law, Samuel Mathers, founder of the secret Order of the Golden Dawn, made up of high-level Freemasons and Rosicrucians, had similar experiences. Quote, "As to the secret chiefs," Mathers wrote, "I have very seldom seen them in their physical bodies. I believe they are human beings living on this earth, but possessed of terrible and superhuman powers. I felt I was in contact with a force so terrifying I had great difficulty in breathing, cold sweats, bleeding from the nose, mouth, and sometimes from the ears." Unquote. Though smaller, the Golden Dawn was comparable to the Vril Society, and here again we have the classic symptoms of demon possession, similar to the terror that seized Hitler at times, and which today affects alleged UFO contactees, who may in fact be the victims of hypnosis. The demons are very versatile, passing themselves off under a variety of labels and outward forms to suit the temperament and beliefs of those they are manipulating. The message they preach, however, remains monotonously the same as that which Blavatsky, Besant, Bailey, Wells, Krem, and a host of others, including Hitler, embraced: higher states of consciousness, reincarnation, yoga, expanded self-awareness, self-realization, the deification of man, and a coming world government, all under the benevolent guardianship of the unknown masters, of course. The seducers and the seduction remain the same. Only the seduced, the human puppets being manipulated on stage, change. When will the curtain open for the final act? Jesus Christ came 1900 years ago to establish the kingdom of God in men's hearts. He was rejected and crucified. The instigator of that foul deed, in which we have all joined, is clearly involved in an all-out effort to establish his own kingdom. There can be little doubt that this is the world government which New Agers imagine will finally bring lasting peace and prosperity based upon inherent human goodness. As for that, here are Hitler's own words, quote, "I had to encourage national feelings for reasons of expediency, but I was already aware that the nation idea could only have a temporary value. The day will come when even here in Germany, what is known as nationalism will practically have ceased to exist. What will take its place in the world will be a universal society of masters and overlords." Unquote. Clearly, the conspiracy to install a world government does not originate with the Trilateralists or Club of Rome. They are mere pawns in a game with much higher stakes than they imagine. When they meet the world ruler, they will be like Goebbels, awed and worshipful. The Antichrist will probably not be possessed by mere demons, but by Satan, the unknown master himself. Though he failed in his mission, Hitler's possession seems to have been of that order. Some Bible scholars feel that the Antichrist will be Satan incarnate, more than a man. Goebbels confided one day to Prince Schaumburg-Lippe, his aide-de-camp, quote, "I see him almost every day, and still there are times when he loses me completely. Who can claim to know him as he really is? Is he really human? I would not want to swear on it. There are times when he gives me the chills." Unquote. Hitler seems to have been chosen for his mission from childhood. Raised in the village of Braunau am Inn, in an area described as a hotbed of mediums, Hitler was undoubtedly involved in spirit seances as a boy. That probably is how and when he first became demonized. This explains his unusual receptivity to occult initiations and instructions he later received in the Thule and Vril societies under those dedicated occultists Dietrich Eckart and Karl Haushofer. Eckart, who used drugs, probably including peyote, and prayed to a black meteorite which he called his Mecca stone, wrote these amazing prophetic words 10 years before Hitler would come to power. Quote, "Follow Hitler. He will dance, but it is I who have called the tune. We have given him the means of communication with them. Do not mourn for me. I shall have influenced history more than any other German." Unquote. For plotting against Hitler, Karl Haushofer's son, Albrecht, was machine-gunned to death by the infamous SS beside Klaus Bonhoeffer, brother of the noted pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He seems to have understood and feared what his father had done in initiating Hitler into black magic. Rudolf Hess has credited Karl Haushofer with being the secret master who unleashed the forces of evil through Germany's Occult Messiah. Taken from a pocket of the jacket he wore when he was executed was a poem in Albrecht's handwriting. It ended with these lines, quote, "My father broke the seal. He sensed not the breath of the evil one, but set him to roam the world." Unquote. The myth of blood. Years later, Hitler reportedly told an aide that, as he lay wounded during World War I, he received a supernatural vision which ordered him to save Germany. The fact that he was 30 years old at the time, the same age at which Jesus Christ began his messianic mission, was of great significance to Hitler. Perhaps unaware that according to the Bible, he was thereby bringing the wrath and judgment of Israel's God upon his nation, Hitler ordered the murder of 6 million Jews. This could be the principal reason why, instead of saving Germany, he destroyed it and most of Europe. The Führer's obsessive hatred of the Jewish race and his determination to wipe them from the face of the earth was more than the fanatical prejudice of a madman. It can only be understood in its occult origins and Eastern mystical roots. The Hindu Aryan mysticism that Hitler adopted was a carefully calculated, point-by-point rebuttal of the biblical gospel. That redemption comes through the shedding of the Messiah's blood in a death that would pay the penalty for man's sin. In contrast, the occult Messiah of the 1,000-year Reich determined to sacrifice the Jewish people in a vain attempt to purify German blood and thereby restore their lost godhood. In spite of modern attempts to do away with it, the abhorrent caste system remains in India, for it is central to Hinduism. One cannot buy or work one's way into any caste, for it comes only by birth, that is, by blood, which can only be purified by spiritual evolution over many reincarnations. Nazi mysticism, however, had a plan for shortening the process. Alfred Rosenberg, a Thulist and one of the highest Nazi officials, wrote in his book, Myth of the 20th Century, quote, "Today there awakens a new faith, the myth of blood, the faith, too, for defending the blood, the divine essence of man." Unquote. Referring to Myth of the 20th Century, Hitler declared, quote, "When you read Rosenberg's new book, You will understand, unquote. Voicing a lie that is as old as the Garden of Eden, yet is at the heart of today's New Age movement, Hitler declared, quote, creation is not yet at an end. Man is becoming God. Man is God in the making, unquote. The quote-unquote man that Hitler had in mind was the blonde, blue-eyed German, and the stepping stone to his godhood was the sacrifice of the Jews. Hitler's Aryan dream of pure blood had another side, the Lebensborn, which sprang up across Germany and were operated almost like human stud farms as part of Hitler's plan to breed a master race of Superman. It was a great honor to be an unwed mother in Germany if one were carrying a future blonde, blue-eyed child for the Führer. Children born at a Lebensborn were graded. The most desirable were adopted. The others were either sterilized or eliminated. There were alleged wholesale kidnappings of desirable non-German children from other countries for the purpose of adding to Germany's breeding stock. Black magicians of the Order SS. In charge of the extermination camps and the Lebensborn was Heinrich Himmler, the most sinister figure in the Third Reich after Hitler himself. Headed by Himmler, the infamous SS was the secret elite corps of Nazi occultism, a religious order that practiced with fanatical dedication Hitler's Aryan mysticism. Known as the Black Order, the SS was undoubtedly the most powerful society of black magicians the world has ever seen. Yoga exercises, Eastern meditation, and visualization, as well as belief in karma, reincarnation, cosmic evolution to godhood, and the unity of all life as part of one living organism, the cosmos, were central beliefs and practices of the SS. This was a Hindu religious order that spent more money on occult investigations and genealogical research, tracing the mystical origins of Aryan supermen back to India and Tibet, than the Americans spent to develop the first atomic bomb. The systematic and efficient extermination of Jews and other quote-unquote undesirables was carried out as a ritual sacrifice to the gods. It was all part of an ongoing evolutionary process. The death of individuals along the way was incidental. What mattered was the eventual development of a new species, the Aryan God-man. At a speech made in Dachau in 1936, Himmler informed high-ranking SS officers that they had all met before, in previous lives, and that after their present lives had ended, they would meet again. Suster calls the SS, quote, the high priesthood of the New Age, the standard-bearers of the coming Superman, magicians who had formed alliances with the mystic Tibetan cities of Agartha and Shamballah, unquote. Their quote-unquote glorious mission was to create a new age, a new world, a new man. In their dedicated fulfillment of this mission given to Hitler by invisible higher beings, the SS murdered 14 million men, women, and children. For the sake of the magical vision of Adolf Hitler and his associates, the Second World War claimed the lives of almost 50 million human beings. Yet they saw themselves as decent, sensitive men who didn't like to see animals suffer. How can this glaring contradiction be explained? They had believed what Krishna taught Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, that there really is no death, so killing isn't murder, because the souls come back again in another form. Like Arjuna, the SS were only performing their sacred duty. Himmler believed in communication with the spirit world. To his masseur, Felix Kirsten, he boasted of his ability to call up spirits and converse with them. The Bible forbids necromancy on the ground that it is a deception. It is not the spirits of the dead one converses with, but demons impersonating them. The same deception was involved in the communication with the unknown masters. But Hitler, Himmler, and their associates were convinced by their initiation into Tibetan Buddhist occultism that they were in touch with real supermen who inhabited the Himalayas. A colony of Tibetans was even brought to Berlin, and when the Russians took that city, they were amazed to find about 1,000 Tibetan corpses. Hindu-Buddhist philosophy was at the heart of Nazism. It is therefore extremely disturbing to note that this is also at the heart of the New Age movement today. There is every reason to believe that this ominous connection is not by chance. As Jean-Michel Engelbert has said, quote, "Those who induced Germany to embrace the swastika are not dead. They are still among us. just as they have been in every era, and doubtless will continue to be until the apocalypse. National Socialism was for them but a means, and Hitler was but an instrument. The undertaking failed. What they are now trying to do is revive the myth using other means." Unquote.